Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm John Clark, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
On today's show, we will be discussing the recent Supreme Court decision, Greece versus Galloway.
But first, we want to tell you a little bit about the sponsors of our show. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing right up on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we are mixing it up, sometimes with a get-together we call a reflections meeting, a potluck at someone's home, and sometimes to play board games or similar activities.
Later on the show, we'll give you websites to visit and some additional details, including times and locations. But first, in our news
news.
Locally, the Rationalists of East Tennessee are hosting a public lecture on May the 18th. This is Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. in the auditorium of the Goins Building on the Hardin Valley campus at Pellissippi State College. This replaces the typical Monday morning event on that day only.
The speaker will be theologian Dr. Robert Price, and the title of his presentation will be Ethics for Humans by Humans. Dr. Price is a member of the Center for Inquiry and the Council of Secular Humanism. He's also a fellow of the Jesus Seminar and moderator of the Human Bible podcast, and the author of several books on biblical scholarship. Dr. Price notes that non-theists are constantly accused of removing any basis for morality in society by rejecting God. But in his talk, he combines elements from Aquinas, Nietzsche, and Durkheim, I guess it would be pronounced, to outline a basis for humanist ethics, asking also whether the supposed need to derive morality from God is not actually fatal to theism.
Once again, this meeting will be held in the Goins Building auditorium of Pellissippi State Community College at 2 p.m. on Sunday, May 18th. The public is invited. Of course, there is no charge. Go to the website of the Rationalists of East Tennessee and click the calendar link for May 18 to get the details. If you type in just rationalist.org, it's the first thing that pops up. I nailed that. Got that webpage right.
All right. So I didn't have anything more prepared for in the news other than as I drove here, I heard of apparently the passing, I assume today, of, I think it's H.R. Giger. He is the artist who drew the spectacular, sometimes creepy aliens on the movie Alien and Aliens. Oh. And I couldn't help but think that he offered a real challenge to the standard view, worldview. I have no idea what his theological beliefs are.
He didn't draw them as the Greys, right? The ones that everybody sees and that do the anal probes?
Nope, he's not that kind of
big eyes, pale skin, yeah. Large head, small mouth, and narrow, like they call them Greys now. I've been watching a lot of nonsense superstition on YouTube lately. There's people out there, and they really believe this stuff, and when they put it up, it's just it's pretty comical. But
yeah.
Anyways, he didn't draw those.
Sorry?
He didn't draw those.
Not that kind, no. He drew the creepy ones. I was a little surprised when the most recent recent movie came out, Prometheus, and it had a kind of a discontinuity with the apparent plot line or some of the assumptions in the background of the first movies. In the Prometheus movie, they're trying to make this link into what looks like earthly theology connections. And I've seen analysis where they talk about the ceremonies that the engineers, that's the term in the Prometheus movie, used to be similar to some of the founding mythologies, some of which I weren't aware of, from Earth, thus implying that the source of our founding mythologies comes from these engineers. I was hoping for a more imaginative backstory than, oh, it's all about us.
I'll say this way: I didn't like the movie. I thought it was visually very appealing, but they almost had, and actually I liked the idea, everything that you just said. I liked all of that, minus one part where they tried to go against what we know of our beginnings, and say that it was they call it panspermia, right? If you seed our planet, seed life here from elsewhere, that doesn't mean that a god did it. That doesn't mean that a super advanced race did it. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't need to know the answer to that. Now, in this movie, the engineers did it, but then they decided to say, there's one line from, I think, the geologist in the movie. It's like, that sure puts a hole in your Darwin theory. It's like, well, no, it's just common descent.
Yeah.
And it would trace it back so many years to the common descent. And if you found out it came from God, if you found out it came from an alien race, none of that would matter. Darwin's theory would still
right.
stand. Yeah, it would still be right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
It's a problem that people don't understand what Darwin's theory really asserts.
Right, even some of the very scientifically minded. This is one of those things like gravity that would, while you might find something wrong with our current knowledge, you are very unlikely to prove it wrong.
You won't overthrow it. What you'll do is you'll add precision to it.
Well, P.Z. Myers calls this the proof of, it's proven that common descent. He's willing to say that, and I think I'm going to have to fall right in line in that group. But before we go on, I do want to mention that Robert Price, who's going to be speaking at Pellissippi State, if you're watching and you're a Christian apologist, perhaps, and you like to bone up and know what us atheists are thinking, so you probably know who William Lane Craig is, and I've seen him debate William Lane Craig. I haven't seen him in person, but I've seen lots of debates on it. He's very good, in my opinion at least. And if you wanted, I would say, I think his oldest debate is like the 90s or something with him, and it's still the same argument today because William Lane Craig hasn't changed anything. He still says the same thing too. But what do you say we move on to Greece versus Galloway and this
recent Supreme Court decision? Well, I'd begun by thinking we might want to talk about the history of the litigation, but then
I see what you
mean. You wanted to address dogma, and
right.
Maybe that is a good point. It was said at the Reason rally by one of the speakers that I don't remember, that we have to also be cautious about accepting dogma ourselves and arguing over points as dogmatically. So for my benefit and the benefit of the viewers, help me. What is dogma?
Well, okay, so first let's do a dogma here. I've got a great definition, and I know you guys will love that it came from Wikipedia. Dogma is a principle or set of beliefs laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. Now, what we mean today is regarding our Constitution and anything that you think led to, or we think led to, the founding of our country. And we're going to talk about church-state separation, and this court case ruled in favor of
a prayer before
Greece,
a
government body, right?
Yeah.
And so this goes to church-state separation issues, which we love to chat about on this show, and we have to fight against because we don't want a state-endorsed religion. And so what ends up happening in these conversations is that people harken back to a quote by one of the founding fathers, or they grab a snippet from an amendment or whatnot, and they speak it as if it stands on its own, and that it's a permanent idea that can't be changed.
So what would be an argument from dogma?
An argument from dogma would be that
to say that, well, the Constitution says it, therefore it must be right.
Well, I like the Second Amendment argument that you hear a lot, which is that, I got the right to bear arms, period. End of story. Mm-hmm. And you just snip that little bit out, And so, hey, I got the right to have I can build a potato gun in my basement. Okay. Well, I got the right to put some sort of
automatic mechanism.
Yeah, you see what I'm going here. So I could rapid fire this potato.
Okay.
Well, as you do this, you're going to need, hey, I want to fire a potato so fast that it gets baked by the time it arrives at its destination, right? Well, this chamber that you're exploding to launch this potato is invariably going to get larger and larger or sophisticated. And guess what? If you use crappy plastic pipe, and all that, it's going to shatter and go into people's bodies. Should everyone at home own a 240 Bravo, a machine gun? Should everyone have a 50 cal? And not the sniper weapon. I mean, like the one you mount on a Humvee. Is that what that? And so, clearly, I don't think most people who even own guns would agree that everyone should have those things. But you get this argument that because it's structured that way, that's what it means from some people, and that we recognize that that's a smaller portion, but that's a dogmatic type of.
So, in the case of the definition, dogma talks about. Laid down by an authority. Who would be the authority when it comes to what we were just discussing, the Second Amendment?
Oh, so I guess this case, the government, and specifically the federal government, right? Okay.
And the Second Amendment was written by actually the first Congress, and members of that Congress were also members, many of them, not all, of the committee that drafted the Constitution.
Right.
So the argument is made that, well, those people have it right because they were the ones who wrote it.
They were the ones there first, right?
Yeah. So when I hear that kind of argument, I can't help but think that it always seems naive, because I'm certain that if you were to put a microphone and interview in this sort of a time travel mindset, the various founders, and ask them what the Constitution means, you would get a variety of interpretations amongst the founders themselves. Right. The ones who signed it would not be in complete agreement.
Let's pick on someone that we hold to a high place in a lot of our arguments. Thomas Jefferson, who owned slaves, and when you read his own work, you see this. He sees that this is a problem.
Yes.
Right, but if you were like fact-based history looking at it, was the problem fixed in that time? No. So to hold him, I don't care who it is, any of them, to the standard of what they said stands forever, it's ridiculous, in my opinion.
If I could put a microphone in front of Jefferson and say, tell the 21st century what you wish would happen, I can't help but root for him to answer in the following way. I would hope that he would say, I want to build a system that will eliminate what he called the peculiar institution, that we have to drive it out of existence, but that he didn't feel he could practically abolish it by legislative fiat, that there would not have been, we would not have had a federal government if the formation of the federal government had been made contingent on that. I know that in his first draft of the Declaration of Independence, he condemned King George for engaging in the slave trade as an evil thing.
Right.
That language was actually stricken from the Declaration of Independence, probably because there were a lot of slaveholders there at the convention, and they didn't want it.
Well, you're a politician in a time where this place doesn't want to become a country exactly, and you've got to bend when the wind blows, and that's what happened. So
I'm not sure who said it, but there's a phrase that politics is the art of that which is possible.
Right. My history professor said the essence of compromise.
The essence of compromise.
So that's what this is. That's what's led up to all this. And what do you say we say what the decision was?
Well, I wanted to summarize by a particular instance, that to say the Constitution is not assailable, to say that it's dogma, is obviously wrong, because our Constitution, as it was originally written, called some people less than full human beings. for purposes of representation, they were only 3/5 human beings. That's unjust. And we can sit here in the 21st century and make that claim and say that the Constitution, when it was created, was flawed. And it's better now for having been changed.
And that being said, we also have to recognize that it stood a long time and it's got some great ideas in it. Right?
Yes, it is. It was put together by people who were actually practicing the science of government.
Yeah.
If you read the Federalist Papers, you will learn how they looked at other governments in the past, both in great antiquity as well as during the Renaissance in Europe, and they cited examples of what kind of worked and how some governments kind of failed, and how our Constitution was put together to try to head off those failures.
Right.
It was a very deliberately crafted scientific effort. If by science we mean we look at the past and we learn from it, and not just take things on faith and look to a good book for inspiration.
We stick with. Nothing's dogmatic is really what they were willing to change their minds about things and change the way things had worked.
All right.
Yeah, let's move on though to the ruling. So this was May the 5th, I think. But no, when was the ruling?
It was announced May the 5th. It was argued back in October
and the
or something like that. November.
Was a 5-4 decision among party lines. No surprise. We could probably put could we get the Supreme Court
with the justices?
It's always good to familiarize yourself with the Supreme Court justices. So
there are 9 of them.
But it was a 5-4 decision. Kennedy, Roberts, and Alito wrote the opinion. Scalia and Thomas did not join their opinion. And then
when you say join, they were in agreement with the majority, but they didn't write anything further.
Right. Now, just before I start running my mouth about stuff that honestly I don't know a lot about, I got a lot of this information from a lawyer who I watch his videos on YouTube. His name is Liberal Viewer, and yes, he is biased towards the liberal perspective. However, his fans and the people that watch the show are quite varied in their political views, and it's good stuff. I read the entire decision, and then I forgot maybe 60% of it because it's legal and boring.
And it makes references to things that if you haven't read it, it's very hard to hold that in.
You don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And so when I say that Scalia and Thomas did not join, it seems to be that they don't believe in the coercion test. So the coercion test is, does this use of prayer persuade people to that religion? Recently, we challenged, the Freedom from Religion Foundation challenged UT Knoxville on its prayer before football games, right? And UT upheld about a 15-year decision, I think 99 or sometime around that, with one of its own professors, to a non-sectarian prayer. In other words, you don't invoke Jesus. You don't tell everyone they're dying and going to hell. You basically bless the football game and you just want this there are guidelines, in other words, to prevent offense and endorsement by the state. I want to remind the viewers at home that this is a call-in show, and if you've got a thought along any of these lines, please go ahead and call in. I could sit here and tell you about what I think all night, but we'd want to hear what you think more. So that's what we mean by a non-sectarian prayer, and not only that, but that prayer is something that we don't like if you're a church-state separatist, but hey, I might be willing to be okay with that rather than have you, telling me flat out, like at a UT game, all the gays are going to hell, You can't even get the Christians to agree on that one, but
yeah.
Anyhow, so Scalia and Thomas appeared to not believe that the coercion test was necessary, and I don't quite understand why. It had to do with older court cases, and I'm not 100% on that. Now, Scalia said that, and Thomas both said that basically the Establishment Clause doesn't include the states. And for those of you at home, the Establishment Clause is this idea that the church and state must be kept separate via ideas in the First Amendment, and came from a letter of Thomas Jefferson to, I want to say, Danbury.
The Danbury Baptists in Connecticut.
Yes. And really, this is an idea that I think was developed greatly by Baptists in, I don't know.
If Joe is here, I think he would say it's Roger Williams, who was in Rhode Island or Plymouth Plantation. Viewers, call in and correct me if I'm getting it wrong.
But yeah, it's this idea that by, because we had these colonies, right? And some of them, it's like, hey, only Catholics can vote. And then after people got mad, they said landowners could vote. And then they said landowners who were, like...
I need to inject in here and say, there was never one where only Catholics could vote.
Okay, right.
And in fact, at the time of the nation's founding, there were 13 the 13 now independent new nations.
Now I'm talking way before the founding of the country.
True. Well, it depends on what you mean by founding. The nation that is the United States of America that we know today came into existence with the adoption of our Constitution.
Okay, hang on. Okay, let's stop now, because this isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about before, because you can't look at America and say America started on this date and that's how it works from here on out.
Right.
And I think this is the argument. This is where I'm devil's advocating here for the Christians that want a prayer in their organization. We did conflate the two before the founding. Now, we can get to your point in a minute, because it will come up later, but I just want to make it clear that, yes, there were places where only Catholics could vote. There were places where only landowners could vote. There were places where pretty much only the rich could vote. And this was Jim Crow before Jim Crow, and it was...
It would be religion crow to make up.
Well, what you have to realize is that the whole world migrated here, and they did it for different reasons. And it wasn't just for freedom of religion. And I just... So you got to remember that people wanted to. These people had more in common now with people that live up in the sticks in the Smoky Mountains right now, because those people just want to be left alone, and that's what the colonists wanted. And they just wanted to pray and do their thing and not have a government looking, knocking on their backs.
I think your statement is too general. Certainly, there would have been some coming for religious freedom, but many of them were coming for economic opportunity.
Oh yeah.
So we can't.
Many of them were coming because their life sucked.
I'd
say about 95% of them came because their life sucked.
Yep. Europe was an overcrowded place where you had this rule that I'm going to probably mangle, where basically the oldest sons could inherit property, and if you weren't the oldest son, you were pretty penniless, and you didn't have much.
That idea persisted here before in the colonies. These ideas all persisted here. We still had our witch hunts. We still had this crap. And then we had this great idea that really not everyone believed in and even agreed upon, and that was the Constitution. And so in that sense is what I'm talking about there.
All right.
But
so in the case of what was going on, though, in Greece, what they had was not quite a decade worth of what appears to be exclusively Christian prayers.
And that's New York.
Greece, New York, yes. And there were complaints filed that this practice was not friendly to the
minority faith,
to persons of minority faith and no faith. And the two litigants, one of whom must be Galloway, were Jewish and atheist, and their complaint was that the city of Greece was creating an atmosphere that was hostile to them in a minority, as a member of a minority belief.
So how might this ruling affect this area and other parts of the country now?
Well,
if they're right that there wasn't necessarily someone forcing it on them, but they weren't really seeking out anyone other than this small, and it wasn't just a group of Christians. It was a very specific group of Christians, by and large, that would get their prayers in the area, and they would repeat.
According to Kennedy's majority opinion, the city of Greece had developed a list of willing pastors and ministers, starting with, although they didn't say phone book, they said something like directory. I think there was a phone book. There was basically a
phone book for faith-based groups and whatnot, but it did not include Many of these Jewish groups certainly didn't include any atheists.
Do you know for sure about that? Because in the portion I read in Kennedy's didn't address what it didn't include. So did the dissenting opinions?
One of the dissenting opinions. So hang on. All right. This is from Justice Breyer, one of the dissenters. Yeah, give it 1 second. We've got a phone call. We'll get to it. Justice Breyer's selection process resulted in a narrow and majority group of citizens who were Christian and a specific Christian group. The town failed to inform volunteers that prayer would be accepted. The town failed to inform prayer givers that prayers must not intend to convert others. In other words, there's that non-sectarian. In other words, they didn't say to persuade them, but they didn't try to stop it. And this is a very good way of, this is basically so the government has plausible deniability, which probably resulted in the way this case turned out.
We're not looking. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and go to our call and see
you
if they
greet
can.
them.
Yeah. Hello, caller. This is Freethought Forum. Could we have a nickname for you?
Yeah, James.
Hello, James. Please speak up.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the guy on my right.
Me.
I hear a lot of stuff. He's saying, this is crap. This is crap. This is crap.
Like what?
Can you be more specific?
Can you be more specific, James?
No, I don't have to be more specific.
Yeah, you do.
All I heard was him say, well, this is crap.
James, what did I say?
If you can't...
Well, the thing I heard was, this is crap.
That's what you heard me...
You got to have some...
Do you have a comment or a question for us, James?
You got to have some respect.
James, do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I got a comment, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, your use of the word crap.
James, I really don't have time for you, and neither do the viewers at home. Sorry.
Yeah, because you guys are full of shit.
All right, so
I
recognize James,
scatological.
And it would be great. I hope you're listening outside there, Jonas. If James calls in again, that's the guy who was very rude to me and Joe as well. So he probably should probably prevent him from calling in.
All right, so I've completely forgotten where we were.
That's all right, because I've got a segue into it.
All right.
I was just joking. All right, so Justice Breyer, though, right before James interrupted us rudely with a bunch of crap. So the town looked the other way, essentially. And it was set up that way in the beginning. Now, we don't know if that's 100% that was intentional or not. We can't. This is that plausible
deniability. The fact that there are other religions is not on the radar of many Christians.
But the fact remains. This was a fact-based kind of decision, too. They would go pick up little facts and then decide whether or not these things actually swayed people one way or the other. And there's not enough information to show that. What the information does show is that the town was looking the other way. And so we've got some, I think you mentioned before the show, in the decision, we have some things in writing which now we can at least go back to and say, look at what this case uncovered. You know, does the town now inform prayer givers? Because it's legal. Does it inform prayer givers that the prayer needs to stay away from offensive terminology,
and proselytizing?
From proselytizing. Does the state look to all people, all groups for invocations? That's why we have secular invocation down here. Should we as secular people, by the way, to our secular viewers, should we be attending these things requesting to do an invocation that is maybe perhaps goes back to something a founding father said, that an idea that really comes into being now, something like equality and better wages. Anyways, an invocation to just say, hey, this is how we begin our ceremony. If they're going to allow that, are they going to now do something more?
So in the case of the decision written for the majority by Kennedy, he outlined several things which sure look to me that they will become a test in future cases of litigation, and that is, are the government bodies being inclusive? And meaning if they do anything that discriminates and or dictates prayer, then they're clearly in the wrong, according to Kennedy's decision.
Right.
We got another call. Let me greet them. Hello, caller. Welcome to Freethought Forum. Can we get a name or a nickname, please? Hello, caller. Can we get a name or a nickname? We're not hearing you. Oops. Well, caller, we apparently we didn't have the volume up here, and we didn't get you. Or
just give us a call back.
The equipment let us down. It might have been haunted, I guess.
Give us a call back. We'll get you on.
So try again. What we do have is that this decision, I think, potentially creates the opportunity for there to be a lot more situations that get litigated, because in what Kennedy has written, he's essentially created a little recipe that could be used to test in the future.
Well, let's add to this one. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
And down in Chattanooga, I'm aware there are some non-believers who have asked, I don't know if it's like a county commission or if it's a city government, for an opportunity to do a secular invocation, and that government body has placed obstacles in their way, saying, well, you've got to be a minister. Well, in Kennedy's decision, he as let's say, he's anticipated that and undercut that argument. Let me see if I can find that quick like a bunny, where Kennedy wrote the following: "The town at no point excluded or denied an opportunity to a would-be prayer giver. Its leaders maintained that a minister or lay person of any persuasion, including an atheist, could give the invocation." So that's real important. I think what it means is that government bodies won't be able to formulate little de facto tests to segregate and discriminate against the non-belief community based upon Kennedy's words here in this decision.
Right. But well, I'll get to where I want to go with that in a minute. I want to mention, though, that the town needs to come up with something. For example, like the U.S. House of Representatives has a guideline for prayers, and I just want to mention them because I like them for the most part. I mean, I'm a church-state separatist, so I'd rather not have a prayer. But just so you know, if we were to meet in middle ground for a little 20 years or something, the guest chaplain should keep in mind that the House of Representatives is comprised of members of many different faiths.
I think it would be composed, not compromised.
Comprised. I want to get the right word. Sorry.
Very good.
Comprised of members of many different faith traditions. The length of the prayer should not exceed 150 words. Keep it simple, stupid. The prayer must be free from personal political views or partisan politics, from sectarian controversies, and from any intimations pertaining to foreign or domestic policy. And you see, it's just a nice invocation. Now, maybe it's said in the name of some god, and that bothers me a little. But that's a lot better than someone getting up there saying, a Christian nation, and gays are killing us off with the Nazi socialist Kenyan dictator.
And I don't think you've used a scatological phrase in all of this.
Yeah.
Now, I must contrast that, though, with what Kennedy wrote.
Yes.
That Kennedy wrote in his decision that the government is not allowed to dictate what the prayer givers can say at all, because becomes mandating speech.
Exactly.
So what Kennedy has written is at odds with what's going on in apparently the U.S. Congress.
Yes, and that is just bizarre to me, because this is somebody who knows very well the paradox is the First Amendment. You got to know. I can speak so freely until I start infringing on other people. And if you're proselytizing, well, now you got to recognize this Establishment Clause. This is why we had it in the first place. So while I'm willing for those of you at home who want a prayer endorsed by the government, or you want "In God We Trust" on a government building, I'm willing to compromise with you for a degree. We got it on the money. I don't like that, but at least you're not sitting there telling me to go to church, or telling me that one type of person's lifestyle is sinful, rather than just saying something nice. And this is why I would support a complete separation of the two, is because now the government doesn't say anything about any of them, and we just vote on stuff. And as long as you can get it into law without saying, you're going to hell, then you've got this separation, and no one's feelings get hurt, at least regarding a state endorsement of an idea. And that includes atheist type ideas. I mean, there are Buddhist ideas that you may not like, right? So
So,
but this sets a standard for this conversation to continue over and over and over again and never get solved.
I think that
in some ways,
and that's because there are contradictory opinions built into it. And in fact, even in Kennedy's majority opinion, he keeps talking about these prayers as if they're always like addressed to the government, saying, you know, the deity is going to guide our legislators to make good laws. And he seems to ignore the fact that, and he's even enabled by saying that the government can't prescribe what the speech should be. And he's ignoring the fact that some of these pastors and ministers that I've seen in Blount County, they get up there and they're going to go on and on about abortion and legislating morality per their Christian worldview that has nothing to do with what the county government of Blount does.
Yeah.
And they've just simply used as a platform paid for by the government and the taxpayers to announce their narrow little view and expect that all of the persons in attendance be quiet while their view is heard and no one else can challenge them.
Right.
And
well, they have the plausible deniability because you could have come in there, right, the way they got it worded, but this is the fact-based decision you're looking, did someone get the opportunity? We don't know. I mean, you did, and the trend is these few people from this same faith.
Well, what I can imagine comes from all of this is that pretty soon there's going to be a recipe for how you solicit prayer from the populace, because what will happen is that governments who want to get prayer in of their own flavor are going to set up discriminatory methods of access, and then that will be the subject of future litigation.
Right. But it's worth noting that, yes...
So let's get the slide up where we talk about what got right and what got wrong.
Let's do that.
We've kind of been...
Or better yet, do you want to do the mid-program break?
Yeah, we're kind of due for that.
Yeah, let's do that.
And then we'll come back to that slide. All right.
You just...
So...
I'll take host one.
You host one?
In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is jointly funded by them and by individual contributions. I think the rest of this is on the video. We should probably just roll the video.
Well, this is a call-in show. We're live today, May 13, and viewers can call us on the number on the screen, and we're going to go to a short, informative video.
Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun.
On this Sunday is the annual Rationalist of East Tennessee Public Lecture. About once a year, we try to host a well-known Freethought speaker. This year, it is Dr. Robert Price. The lecture is at 2 p.m. in the auditorium of the Goins Building at the Pellissippi State Community College Hardin Valley campus. The lecture title is... What do you got here?
Ethics?
Oh, Ethics for Humans by Humans.
I may have mangled the spelling.
Yeah. He has written a book with the provocative titles, The Incredible Shrinking Son of Man and Deconstructing Jesus. He has appeared in the documentary The God Who Wasn't There. Dr. Price teaches philosophy and religion at the John E. Coleman Theological Seminary and is professor of biblical criticism at the Center of Inquiry Institute. He also hosts the website The Bible Geek. The public is invited to hear this thought-provoking speaker. Once again, this is 2 p.m., Sunday, May the 18th, in the auditorium of the Goings Building at the Pellsbury State Community College Hardin Valley campus.
And, of course, we'll mention again, it is free.
Free.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God altogether, you're not alone.
You're not alone. We're together. It's like herding cats, us. So we're together, but you say it, then I say it.
All right, yep.
Because that's how it is. We were going to talk now about what they got right and what they got wrong in the decision.
Yep.
Or at least what we think they did. So, got right.
So if we take the words of our Constitution, that we can't establish a church, then what they got right is that they're saying that the government, in this case it would be the city of Greece, can't tell people how to make the prayers that they're offering.
Right.
They can't say, you will compose a prayer that meets the following recipe or something like that.
Yeah, and
they can't tell them how to pray.
And we say that knowing that even though I was talking about guidelines for non-sectarian prayer, we tie ourselves in a knot here, because if you meet in the middle in this way, you're letting the government tell people pretty much how they can pray. And if you ask me, the libertarian part of me is totally against that. I mean, I wouldn't want the government telling you how to pray or me how to pray, or, it just shouldn't say anything about it at all. So we think that they got that right, actually. We're agreeing with the conservative justices.
With Kennedy,
right.
That the government has no business dictating
Shouldn't be doing it.
how we pray. Where they got it wrong is they let a government body carve out a little place for prayer in a government building as part of a government activity.
And they basically, I'm not going to say they made no attempts. I'm not going to exaggerate that much, but they made very little attempt to bring in people of other faiths and to include their own, the city of Greece, including their own citizens to this event. And that's a problem. I mean, it allows this thing to just continue and perpetuate all across the country. And where's this conversation going to end up? Is somebody's going to get up there and proselytize, and then somebody's going to say, well, you can't do that. And they'll go, oh, well, we ruled that we could have the prayer. And then somebody's going to say, well, you shouldn't proselytize. And then we're going to be telling people how to pray. Yep. And then someone's going to say, the government's getting in here and telling we should just have anything. Yep. Well, just imagine opening a ceremony every time. Let's say it's weekly, monthly, whatever it is, whichever type, and you get just different types of prayers, and each one of them, we're talking about a worst-case scenario, is proselytizing, finger-pointing. It's
condemning with other members of the public.
Does that sound American to anyone? That's ridiculous. That's just crazy. And we've got other countries now that have they may still have a state religion, but they've basically, religion has just left all their state issues. It's not a big deal. And they copied us. We're the ones that made it this way, and they don't have these problems. So why are we going back around in a circle? We've forgotten our history. Yeah.
Failed to learn from our history. Now, an argument may be made that to some extent we have this vigorous religious diversity because of our separation, whereas in Europe, I think what happened is that because there are many times their state religions, it means that people were sort of coerced, maybe is not quite the right word, but into participation, whether they had enthusiasm or not. Whereas here, you you join a church and pay for it because you've got genuine enthusiasm about it. No government entity is making you support it. So here, membership in a church is utterly voluntary, and that may make it it builds sort of a team spirit for that church that you just don't get when you tell everyone you're going to show up and say rah for our team.
Right.
Coercively.
One of the strongest critics of this idea against church and state, criticisms you hear, particularly in this area and particularly from Christians, is that this nation was founded on God. And when they say God, of course,
they mean Yahweh?
Yahweh or actually, I don't know which one they mean. I don't think they know either. But what they mean is the same God they hear in Sunday.
It would be the God of
Sunday
Abraham.
Church. Right, the God of Abraham.
If you ask them that, do you mean the God of Abraham?
There we go.
The one who told him to kill his son, they would say yes.
Right, and Jesus and redemption through the sacrifice and all that good stuff, bad stuff. And what they would say is they would say that it's founded on Christian principles, and they would say things. You see the Ten Commandments posted in courtrooms, right? And they're getting taken down, they're getting put up, it's ridiculous. Here's a letter. This is Thomas Jefferson writing to Thomas Cooper, addressing this idea that the nation was founded on Christian principles. And now my screen blacked out. For we know that the common law, this is English common law, is that system of law which was introduced by the Saxons on their settlement in England, and altered from time to time by proper legislative authority from that time to the date of the Magna Carta, which terminates the period of the common law or lex non scriptia and commences that of the statute law or lex scripta. This settlement took place about the middle of the 5th century, but Christianity was not introduced till the 7th century.
Sorry, say that again?
Yes. So Christianity, the settlement of this took place about the middle of the 5th century, but Christianity was not introduced till the late 7th century. The conversion of this Christian king, of this Heptarchy, having taken place about the year of 598, and that of the last about 686, here then was a space 200 years, during which the common law was in existence, and Christianity no part of it. If it ever was adopted, therefore, into the common law, it must have been between the introduction of Christianity and the date of the Magna Carta. So, we have...
the date of the Magna Carta is like in the 1200s, 1250, something like that.
You brought it up, I didn't. So, some of that was kind of hard to follow because it's written in slightly different tongue, right? But we've got 200 years of English law, which we adopted a great deal of, which had no influence from Christianity that we know of. And I can see a few places for someone to wiggle in that, well, I mean, they had 600 years to get some crap from, the...
You're using that scatological again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry, James, if I said crap again and it bothered you. You said crap like 20 times more than me, and it bothered me and everyone at home. So, anyways, there you go. Founded on Christian principles? I think not.
Well, one's got to ask the question, what's Christian principles? Is to go back to the God of Abraham, is being willing to kill your child at the request of a God a Christian principle? I don't think we have that in our nation. I think if you kill your child, you're punishable.
Well, let me devil's advocate that for a bit, because, and callers, if you want to call in, I'm gonna jump on some of the religious side here. Let's use a good idea. Thou shalt not steal.
All right.
Okay, let's use
Respect one another's property.
Now, the idea to think that while I think that's a great Christian idea. Did the Christians get it from somewhere else?
There we go. It's not a Christian idea.
Hey, no, I'm fine.
It's not an exclusively Christian idea.
Look, I'm sorry. The idea that stealing came from any one group, or the idea not to steal came from any one group, that's bizarre too, okay? I'm fine, Christians. Okay, thou shalt not steal. You figured it out on your own. That's great, okay? But a lot of people figured that one out on their own, okay? So that's a good idea that we like.
I would say that if you aren't able to figure that out on your own, I hope you maintain the faith in your God.
Hey, look, I'm saying I figured things out on my own before, right? And then I read a book, and it's like, oh, I was thinking of that. I just didn't write it. I didn't write the book and didn't get a date on it. Somebody, John said it first. All right, so I'm fine with them saying, hey, we came up with some ideas. I'm sure you did, all right? I'm sure some of them were borrowed and all this other stuff, and I'm sure some of them were your own. And so, fine. We're on those principles, but guess what? We're not on the other ones. We're not on the Abraham's. Well, let's be fair. I mean, I don't see a lot of Christians out there killing their children.
Well, apparently they haven't had God talking to them. It's the issue of if they would be willing.
I don't like bringing up that one.
Yeah, well,
because of that, because it just, I'll analyze it the same way the Supreme Court justices did here, factually. I just don't see it happening, and so I like to stay away from that one. But at the same time, there's ideas that I do see happening. Circumcision. What the hell? What the hell?
Yes, as Hitchens would put it, genital mutilation, and that way it's gender independent. We don't think genital mutilation
and that
is
happens
a good idea.
all over the place.
Either way.
And people say, oh, well, it helps with preventing infections. Look, there's another way, and this is just a secret from me to you. Soap and water.
All right.
Maybe some vigorous motion, and you'll be good to go.
Yep.
All right? So that's an idea that I don't like. So I'm sorry, you don't get to insert that into our country, and for the very same reason that even the Christians that helped found it didn't want the other Christians crap in there. Oh, I said it again.
You've done it again.
I said it again, James. Are you counting? You got to tally, James, how many times I said it. All right? And that's Christian crap, and that isn't even my own words. That's the words from people. I'm sure if you went back and talked to them, they'd be like, yeah, that's some Christian crap I don't want in my... And these would be Christians saying this.
So on May 5th, when the decision was handed out, my inbox got a lot of traffic from various secular groups. The Freedom from Religion Foundation announced that they're going to have a contest for the best secular invocation. The various, I think, Center for Inquiry and Secular Humanists, they have announced not so much a contest, but an effort to educate people on how to perform a secular invocation and encouraging them to do so for their local governments. And I think that that's going to be the next thrust in this battle in the war of church and state.
Well, right. It's following the Fox News war on Christmas. Please stop having your Christmas, your religious items on the public sphere. And then the answer is no, you're trampling my freedom of religion. And so the next suit that comes in is, well, I want my non-belief expressed in the public sphere. And let's admit, at this point, now we see the problem. Let's say you were living in a opposite world, and we were expressing another religion on the public sphere, and then you were like, well, that's not fair. I want mine on the public property. And so now you got you two fighting in the middle of town square like idiots.
So Sam, I think we got
church-state separation. I think
we got a slide or two here where, if we move up to the slide where we've got what happens when we've got no limit on what can be said during government prayer. Are we going to have, you
have the flying spaghetti monster in there.
Yes.
I invoke this day of government service to the beer volcano and stripper factory.
That's right.
Are you okay with that at home? Because that's freedom of expression of a religion.
And Justice Kennedy's decision would enforce that, meaning you can't tell someone that when they do their government prayer, that it can't be to the flying spaghetti monster. And what is the other bugaboo that we keep hearing about? There's the other Abrahamic religions that
Islam,
are living here amongst us. Yeah. Yep. Is the county of Blount, is the county of Knox, are they going to make a good faith effort to allow prayers by imams, and give them the identical access that they give to Baptist ministers?
Well, we can game theory this again too. It's the same thing. Let's say you do. You say freedom of religion for all to 100% degree. Are they going to be allowed, the fundamentalist sects, to circumcise their daughters? Is that going to be allowed? Are they going to be allowed? And well, let's stick to church state. Is the government going to fund the circumcision of their daughters? Is that cool? I mean, all you're going to end up doing is fighting in town square again. And then you're going to be right back, actually right before the colonists swam over here in a boat. That's swimming, right? You're going to be right back in the same square one, and you're going to be fighting again. And somebody's going to say, man, why don't we just take all this crap and put it somewhere else? You can believe what we want, just... You believe your crap over there, and I believe my crap over here, and we don't let that interfere with our government. We already know where that's going. So here's the question. Now that we've got this standard, just like Forrest is saying here, are we going to let Muslim invocations...
So let's grab this section here, the script here.
Oh, you want to read.
So, well, the Supreme Court ruled the following. The town of Greece does not violate the First Amendment by opening its meeting with prayer that comports with our tradition and does not coerce participation by non-adherents. The judgment of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit is reversed. So, this raises the question.
So when will an imam be coming to you leading a prayer at the next government meeting you attend? Writing for the majority, Justice Kennedy opined, should believers choose to exit the room during a prayer they find distasteful, should non-believers choose to exit the room, their absence will not stand out as disrespectful or even noteworthy. And should they remain, their quiet acquiescence will not, in light of our traditions, be interpreted as an agreement with the words or ideas expressed. Neither choice represents an unconstitutional position as to mature adults.
Yeah. So what they're saying is that if you don't believe the same way that the person leading the prayer, they're essentially saying acquiesce, sit there and be silent.
Right.
Now, if we have an imam leading that prayer, do we think that the Christians in Blount County and Knox County and Anderson County are going to be quiet and be respectful?
Well, let's already say 80% of them will, and then the others won't. We already know the answer. You already know what's going to happen.
When the first Buddhist gave a prayer in the U.S. Congress, first time it ever happened, a Buddhist gave a prayer. He was interrupted by Christians from the gallery. The very first attempt caused Christians to interrupt and not respect the diversity that our First Amendment should should entitle us all to feel we have.
Well, and in recent times, we've already had Juan Mendez, Representative of Arizona, stood up, did pretty much a secular invocation like we're talking about, and after he was finished, bam, moved that we do a do-over because that wasn't good enough. We need to say God. We got to put it in.
Oh, really? They insisted on another prayer?
Yeah, and they voted it, bam, and led another one right after him. So
that's not respect, huh?
Yeah, where's the respect in that? So you already know what's going to happen. Establishment clause is the most awesome idea that we've come up with so far, and if you got a better idea, let's get it in there and figure it out. But until then, I think it's pretty easy to figure out what we need to do.
All right, well, we're coming down to the last minute. Let's wrap this up.
Wrapping it up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been a Freethought Forum, a program of the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Clark.
And I'm Faithless Forrest.
Send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. You can see the show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station and at 2100 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
We would like to thank our viewers and send our thanks to Sam and Jonas for technical support and to the staff at CTV KNOX and to all of our callers.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious group in America. Right here in East Tennessee, the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee are places you can find fellowship and fun.
You are not alone. All right. See you next week.